The Haunted Auditorium High School is supposed to be a mix of classes, sports, and socializing. But at Lincoln High, there was one place that gave everyone the creeps: the old auditorium. Built nearly a century ago, the auditorium was known for its creaky wooden floors, dim lighting, and cold drafts that seemed to come out of nowhere. Students whispered about how it might be haunted, but most people brushed it off as silly stories. Still, the place had a strange, unsettling energy that was hard to ignore. The rumors all started with the story of Clara, a stagehand who worked on school plays decades ago. According to legend, Clara was adjusting a set piece high in the rafters during a performance when she lost her balance and fell. Some said it was an accident, while others believed there was something more mysterious about her fall. Regardless of what truly happened, Clara didn't survive, and ever since, odd things had been happening in the auditorium. Lights flickered for no reason. Props went missing and turned up in strange places. People swore they heard footsteps or faint laughter when the room was empty. But no one had ever seen anything that could confirm the rumors until Jake. Jake was a junior and an active member of the drama club. He loved being on stage and had spent countless hours in the auditorium, helping with sets, rehearsing lines, and organizing costumes. He had heard the stories about Clara, but never believed them. To him, they were just tales to scare freshmen. Ghosts aren't real, he'd say whenever someone brought it up. One evening, Jake stayed late at school to work on the set for the upcoming play. The rest of the drama club had gone home, but Jake volunteered to finish painting the backdrop. He liked the quiet of the empty auditorium and found it easier to concentrate when no one else was around. He turned on some music and got to work, humming along as he painted large, sweeping strokes of blue across the canvas. After about an hour, Jake noticed something strange. The music he was playing from his phone suddenly stopped. He walked over to check it and saw that the screen was frozen. Frustrated, he restarted the phone and pressed play again. But a few minutes later, the lights above the stage began to flicker. Jake looked up, thinking there might be an electrical issue. "Great," he muttered. "Just what I need." He tried to ignore it and went back to painting. But then he heard it, soft, muffled laughter coming from the seats in the auditorium. He froze, his paintbrush hovering midair. The laughter was faint but unmistakable. It echoed faintly, as though someone were sitting far away in the darkened rows of chairs. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice shaky. "Who's there?" There was no answer. Jake told himself it was probably just his imagination. The auditorium was old, and sounds echoed strangely in the space. Still, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. He decided to turn on the stage lights to brighten the room. Walking over to the switchboard, he flipped the controls, and the lights blazed to life. The laughter stopped. "See?" Jake said to himself, trying to sound confident. Nothing to worry about. He went back to his work, but his focus was shattered. Every little noise seemed amplified. The creak of the wooden floor, the distant hum of the building's old heating system, the rustle of fabric from the stage curtains. Then he heard it again, footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, as if someone were walking across the stage behind him. Jake spun around, his heart racing. The stage was empty. "Is someone messing with me?" he called out, louder this time. "This isn't funny." Silence. Jake stood still, straining to hear any sound. After a moment, he shook his head and tried to laugh it off. "I'm just tired," he muttered. "That's all." But then the temperature in the room began to drop. It was subtle at first, like a faint chill, but soon it was so cold that Jake could see his breath. He rubbed his arms, trying to stay warm, and glanced nervously around the stage. That's when the ladder he'd been using earlier suddenly tipped over, crashing to the ground with a loud bang. Jake jumped, his heart pounding in his chest. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping the beam of light across the dark corners of the room. "Okay, seriously," he said, his voice trembling. "Who's there?" As the flashlight beam moved across the stage, Jake froze. There, standing at the edge of the stage, was a faint figure. It was a woman with long hair that hung over her face, obscuring her features. She wore an old-fashioned dress, the kind Jake had seen in pictures from decades ago. The figure didn't move, but seemed to be staring straight at him. Jake couldn't breathe. He wanted to run, but his legs felt like they were stuck to the floor. The figure slowly raised a hand and pointed directly at him. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. Jake didn't stick around to find out what would happen next. He grabbed his backpack and bolted out of the auditorium, leaving the unfinished set behind. His heart didn't stop racing until he was safely outside, where the cool night air felt like a relief. The next day, Jake told his friends what had happened. They laughed, saying he must have imagined it. "You were probably just tired," one of them said. "Or maybe you've been listening to too many ghost stories." But Jake knew what he saw. The image of the figure on the stage was burned into his mind. After that night, he refused to stay in the auditorium after dark. He even started skipping drama club meetings when they ran late, making excuses about having too much homework. The rest of the drama club noticed his change in behavior. "Come on, Jake," his friend Mia said one afternoon. "You can't let some silly story scare you away. You've spent more time in that auditorium than anyone. You know there's nothing to be afraid of." Jake wanted to believe her, but he couldn't shake the memory of that night. He started to wonder if he should tell a teacher or even the principal about what he'd seen. But what would he say? That he'd seen a ghost? He doubted anyone would take him seriously. Over the next few weeks, strange things continued to happen in the auditorium. Other students reported hearing whispers or seeing shadows move across the walls. One girl claimed her costume had disappeared, only to reappear neatly folded on the stage. The rumors about Clara grew, and soon, even the teachers were avoiding the auditorium after school hours. Despite everything, the drama club decided to go ahead with the play. The show must go on, as they say. But Jake couldn't bring himself to be part of it. He stepped down from his role, saying he wasn't feeling well. Deep down, he felt guilty for abandoning the club, but he couldn't face the thought of going back to that stage. On opening night, Jake sat in the audience with his friends, trying to enjoy the performance. The play went smoothly at first, with no signs of anything unusual. But during the final act, just as the lead actress delivered her most emotional line, the stage lights flickered, the audience murmured, and the actress hesitated, glancing nervously around the stage. Then a cold wind swept through the auditorium, making everyone shiver. Jake's stomach dropped. He recognized that feeling. As the wind died down, a soft, eerie laugh echoed through the room. The audience fell silent, their eyes wide with fear. And for a brief moment, Jake thought he saw her, the faint figure of a woman standing in the shadows, watching the stage. The play ended in an uneasy silence. The audience applauded politely, but the usual excitement of opening night was missing. Jake knew that Clara's presence had been felt by everyone in the room. After that night, the school decided to renovate the auditorium. They replaced the old lights, repaired the floors, and repainted the walls. But no amount of renovation could erase the stories or the lingering sense of unease. The legend of Clara lived on, and students continued to whisper about the haunted auditorium for years to come. As for Jake, he eventually returned to the drama club, but he never stayed late again. He learned to appreciate the daylight and the company of his friends, and he always left the auditorium long before the sun went down. Some nights, as he walked past the building, he thought about Clara and wondered if she was still there, watching over the stage she had once called home. The locker that screamed at Madison High School. Everyone knew about Locker 113. It wasn't just any locker, it was the one no one wanted. People whispered about it in the hallways and told scary stories about what had happened there. Years ago, a student named Ben got trapped inside that locker because of a prank. His friends had thought it would be funny to lock him in and then let him out after a few minutes. But something went wrong. Ben suffocated before anyone came to help. Ever since that day, Locker 113 had been surrounded by strange rumors. Some students said they had heard knocking sounds coming from the locker. Others claimed they saw it rattle as if someone were inside, even when it was empty. A few even said they heard faint cries or whispers late at night. The school tried to brush off these stories as nothing more than students' imaginations running wild. But most kids avoided the locker anyway. Teachers didn't pay much attention to the stories, thinking they were just silly gossip. But to the students, Locker 113 was more than just a metal box. It was a warning. At the start of her sophomore year, Lily Thompson was assigned Locker 113. When she saw the number, her stomach sank. She had heard all the stories. Her older brother had even warned her about it. If you get Locker 113, ask for a different one, had said. But when she asked the school secretary to change her locker, she was met with a curt response. All the lockers are signed, dear. You'll be fine, the secretary said, barely looking up from her computer. Lily decided to ignore the rumors. It's just a locker, she told herself. Ghosts aren't real, and nothing's going to happen. She loaded her books into Locker 113 and slammed the door shut, trying to push the creepy stories out of her mind. The knocking begins for the first few days. Nothing unusual happened. Lily used the locker like everyone else used theirs. She told herself the rumors were just made-up stories to scare new students. But then, one afternoon, as she was putting her books away, she heard a faint knock. It was so soft that she thought she'd imagined it. She stood still for a moment, her hand frozen on the locker door, listening. There it was again, a quiet, rhythmic tapping from inside the locker. Lily's heart started to race. She opened the locker quickly, half expecting to see someone hiding inside. But it was empty. Her books, notebooks, and pencil case sat neatly on the shelves. She looked around the hallway, but no one was near her. It's just my imagination, she thought, slamming the locker shut. But the knocking didn't stop. Over the next few days, it grew louder and more persistent. Sometimes it happened when Lily was standing right in front of the locker. Other times, she would hear it from across the hallway. Each time she opened the door, the locker was empty. Lily started to feel uneasy, but she tried to convince herself it was just a weird coincidence. Maybe the old locker was settling or the hinges were loose. You're overthinking it, she told herself. But deep down, she wasn't so sure. The message one morning. Lily arrived at school early to finish her homework. The hallways were quiet, and most of the lights were still off. She walked to her locker and opened it to grab her notebook. That's when she saw it. A message scratched into the metal inside the locker door. The words were jagged, as if carved with something sharp. Let me out, it read. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the words, her mind racing. Who could have done this? The scratches looked old, as if they had been there for years. She ran her fingers over the letters, feeling the grooves in the metal. A chill ran down her spine. She slammed the locker shut and backed away, her hands trembling. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. Something was wrong with Locker 113. She decided she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. Asking for help, Lily went straight to the janitor, Mr. Harris. He was an older man who had worked at the school for decades. If anyone knew about the locker, it would be him. "Mr. Harris, can I switch lockers?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked up from his clipboard. "Why? What's wrong with your locker?" It's, it's making noises," she said, "and I found a message scratched inside." Mr. Harris frowned. "Locker 113, huh?" he muttered under his breath. Then he shook his head. "I've heard the stories, but there's nothing wrong with that locker. It's just an old box. You'll be fine." But Lily started to protest, but he cut her off. "I can't move you. There's nowhere else to put you," he said firmly. "Just ignore it. You'll see. It's nothing." Feeling frustrated and a little scared, Lily left the janitor's office. She knew she wasn't imagining things, but no one seemed to believe her. She decided to avoid the locker as much as possible, but that was easier said than done. The scream one evening, Lily stayed late at school to work on a group project. Her friends had already left, and she was finishing up her part of the assignment in the library. By the time she packed up her things, the hallways were empty and eerily quiet. As she walked past the row of lockers, she heard it, a scream. It was loud, sharp, and filled with terror. Lily froze in place, her heart pounding. The sound seemed to come from locker 113. She turned slowly to look. The locker door was rattling violently, as if someone inside was trying to break out. Lily wanted to run, but her feet felt glued to the floor. The scream echoed again, sending chills down her spine. Finally, she snapped out of her shock and bolted down the hallway. She didn't stop until she reached the principal's office. "You have to check the security cameras," she begged. "Something is wrong with locker 113. The principal, Mr. Andrews, looked skeptical but agreed to review the footage. Lily sat nervously in a chair as he pulled up the recordings. They watched as the empty hallway appeared on the screen. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, the locker door started to shake. It moved harder and harder, slamming against its frame. No one was near it. The rattling grew more violent, and then, suddenly, it stopped. Mr. Andrews stared at the screen, his face pale. That's impossible," he whispered. Sealing the locker the next day, the school made a decision. Locker 113 was sealed shut with heavy chains and a padlock. No one was allowed to use it anymore. The janitor painted over the scratched message, and the school administration told everyone to stop spreading rumors about the locker. But the students knew the truth. Locker 113 wasn't just a locker. It was a trap for something, or someone, that couldn't rest. Lily felt relieved that she didn't have to deal with the locker anymore, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Sometimes, when she walked past the sealed locker, she thought she heard faint knocking. She never stopped to check. She didn't want to know, and neither did anyone else. The shadow in the library. The library at Crestwood High was a peaceful place, a quiet haven where students could escape the noise of the school. It was filled with shelves of books, the scent of old paper, and a sense of calm. Many students spent their afternoons there, reading, studying, or just enjoying the quiet. But the library had a secret, one that had been whispered about for years. Some said a shadowy figure haunted the aisles, appearing to those who stayed too late. Tyler was a junior who loved the library. Unlike many of his classmates, who preferred the noisy cafeteria or the bustling gym, Tyler felt at home among the books. He loved the way the sunlight streamed through the tall windows during the day and how the place seemed to hold its breath in the evenings. It was his favorite spot to study, and he often stayed late to finish his homework or lose himself in a good book. One chilly autumn evening, Tyler found himself alone in the library. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The last of the other students had left, and even the librarian, Mrs. Hensley, had gone to her office. Tyler was so absorbed in his notes that he didn't notice how quiet the library had become until he heard the clock chime 6. He glanced up and realized the room was much dimmer than before. Shadows stretched across the floor, and the corners of the library were shrouded in darkness. Tyler packed his things, intending to leave, but then something caught his eye. On the far wall, a shadow moved. At first, he thought it might be from a tree swaying outside, but there was no one there to cast it. "Hello," Tyler called out, his voice echoing in the empty room. There was no response. He told himself it was nothing, just his imagination playing tricks on him. But then the shadow appeared again, this time closer. It was shaped like a person, but with no face, no features. It didn't walk, it glided, its movements smooth and eerie. Tyler's heart raced. He stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The shadow moved closer, and Tyler's instinct kicked in. He grabbed his bag and dashed for the door. But when he reached it, the handle wouldn't budge. Panic set in as he turned back to see the shadow standing right in front of him. It raised a hand, long and thin, and pointed toward the shelves. "What do you want?" Tyler whispered, his voice trembling. The shadow didn't speak, it only gestured again. Despite his fear, Tyler felt an odd pull, as if the shadow was urging him to follow. Summoning his courage, he stepped closer to the shelves it had indicated. His eyes scanned the rows of books, and then he saw it. An old, dusty book with a faded title, The Unfinished Story. He reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers brushed the cover, the shadow vanished, and the door behind him clicked open. Tyler's legs felt weak, but he managed to leave the library, the strange book clutched in his hands. The mystery of the book, when Tyler got home, he couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He placed the book on his desk and stared at it. The cover was worn, and the title was written in elegant, looping letters. He opened it carefully, finding the pages yellowed with age. The story inside was half-written, as though the author had stopped mid-thought. Curiosity got the better of him, and Tyler began to read. The story was about a librarian who loved books so much that she spent her life collecting rare ones. But one day, she found a book that wasn't like the others. It seemed alive, its words changing each time she read it. The story ended abruptly, leaving Tyler with more questions than answers. The next day at school, Tyler couldn't concentrate. During lunch, he told his best friend Mia about the shadow and the book. Mia was skeptical at first. "Maybe you were just tired," she said. "You've been staying up late to study a lot." "I know what I saw," Tyler insisted. "And the book. It's strange. It's like the story's alive." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Alive? Like it changes?" Tyler nodded. "You have to see it for yourself. Come to the library with me after school." A shared discovery that evening, Tyler and Mia returned to the library. Mrs. Hensley greeted them with a smile. "Staying late again, Tyler?" she asked. "Just for a bit," he replied, feeling a twinge of nervousness. He led Mia to the table where he usually sat. The library was quiet, and the fading sunlight cast long shadows across the room. Tyler pulled out the book and showed it to Mia. She hesitated before opening it, as if she could sense something unusual about it. As she flipped through the pages, her expression changed. "This is weird," she said. "The words feel different." "Exactly," Tyler said. "It's like it's alive." As they studied the book, the shadows in the room seemed to grow darker. Tyler noticed the same shadowy figure he'd seen before moving along the far wall. "Mia," he whispered, pointing. She followed his gaze and gasped. The shadow glided toward them, stopping a few feet away. It raised a hand and pointed at the book. Tyler and Mia exchanged nervous glances. "What do you want us to do?" Mia asked, her voice shaking. The shadow didn't answer. Instead, it gestured toward the shelves again. Tyler and Mia followed its movements, scanning the rows of books until they found another old, dusty volume. This one was titled The Lost Librarian. Unraveling the truth over the next few days, Tyler and Mia dove into the mystery. They read the second book, which told the story of a librarian who disappeared after discovering a strange book in her collection. The details matched the rumors about Crestwood's library and its missing librarian from years ago. The shadow, they realized, must be connected to her. Determined to find out more, they searched the library's archives. Old newspapers confirmed the story. A librarian named Evelyn Grant had vanished decades ago, leaving behind no clues except for a note about an unfinished story. "Do you think the shadow is her?" Mia asked. "Maybe," Tyler said. "Maybe she's trapped, and she's trying to tell us something." They decided to stay late again, hoping to communicate with the shadow. As the library emptied and the evening deepened, the shadow appeared once more. This time, it seemed more insistent, pointing toward a specific section of the library. Tyler and Mia followed, their hearts pounding. Behind a row of books, they discovered a hidden compartment. Inside was a box containing letters, photographs, and another book, one even older than the others. This book was titled The Keeper of Shadows. The final piece, the last book, revealed the truth. Evelyn Grant had found a way to bind her spirit to the library, hoping to protect its secrets. But something had gone wrong, leaving her trapped as a shadow. The unfinished stories were the key to freeing her. Tyler and Mia realized they needed to complete the stories to break the curse. They spent days writing, pouring their creativity into finishing the tales. As they wrote the final words of the unfinished story, the library seemed to brighten. The shadow appeared one last time, but now it looked different. It was no longer dark and featureless. It had the shape of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Thank you," the shadow said softly before fading away. The air in the library felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. Tyler and Mia looked at each other, both amazed and relieved. From that day on, the library felt different. The shadows no longer seemed threatening, and the strange books were gone. Tyler and Mia kept their adventure a secret, but they knew they'd always share the bond of solving the mystery together. And though Tyler still loved the library, he made sure never to stay too late again. Every fall, the Pine Valley High School track team gathered on the field for their evening practices. The cool air of autumn made it the perfect time to train, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, the track always seemed to change. The once warm and lively atmosphere grew quiet and unsettling. For years, students talked in hushed voices about a ghostly figure that appeared near the finish line, but no one had ever proven its existence. It was just one of those stories meant to scare newcomers or passed around during late-night conversations. Emma had just joined the track team. She was eager to improve her speed and prove herself. She had heard the rumors about the ghost, but she didn't believe in such things. Ghost stories were for kids, she thought, not for someone as serious as her. Besides, she was too focused on her training to let silly stories distract her. Her dream was to become one of the fastest runners in the school, maybe even the whole state. One evening, after the rest of the team had packed up and gone home, Emma decided to stay a little longer. The track was empty, and the cool evening air felt refreshing. She thought it was the perfect opportunity to work on her sprints without any distractions. The floodlights cast long shadows across the field, but Emma didn't mind. She liked the quiet. It gave her a sense of peace and focus. As she started her sprints, she pushed herself harder with each lap. Her breathing became heavier, and her legs ached, but she felt proud of her determination. She was rounding the final turn of her last lap when she noticed something strange. A figure was standing at the finish line. At first, Emma thought it was one of her teammates who had come back to the track. She squinted, trying to make out who it was. The figure looked pale and thin, dressed in what seemed like old-fashioned athletic clothes. The outfit reminded her of something she had seen in black and white photos of athletes from decades ago. She slowed her pace, puzzled. "Hey, are you okay?" she called out, her voice echoing in the empty stadium. The figure didn't move or respond. It just stood there, facing her. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Something about the figure didn't seem right. As Emma got closer, the figure turned and started moving toward her. But it didn't move like a person. Instead of running, it floated just above the ground, its feet never touching the track. Emma froze in her tracks, her heart pounding. She had never seen anything like it. The figure seemed to glide effortlessly, coming closer and closer. Fear rooted Emma to the spot. She wanted to turn and run, but her legs wouldn't move. The figure passed right through her, and in that moment, she felt an icy chill that made her knees buckle. It was as if all the warmth had been sucked out of her body. She collapsed onto the track, trembling. When she finally gathered the courage to look back, the figure was gone. The track was empty, just as it had been before. Emma's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Was it real? Was her mind playing tricks on her? She sat on the track for a long time, trying to calm herself. Eventually, she picked herself up and walked home, her thoughts heavy with confusion and fear. The next day, Emma couldn't focus during practice. Her coach noticed and pulled her aside. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Emma hesitated, unsure if she should tell him what she had seen. Would he believe her? Finally, she decided to speak up. "Coach, I think I saw something last night. Someone or something." The coach's expression grew serious. He glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "You're not the first person to say that," he said quietly. Emma's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" she asked. The coach sighed and leaned against the railing. "Years ago, there was a runner on this team who was one of the best we've ever had. He was fast, determined, and always pushed himself to the limit. But during a big meet, something went wrong. He collapsed just before the finish line and, well, he didn't make it. They said it was a heart condition that no one knew about. Ever since then, people have claimed to see him near the finish line. Some say he's still trying to finish his last race." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. The coach's story matched what she had experienced. "Do you think it's real?" she asked hesitantly. The coach shrugged. "I don't know. But I'll tell you this. You're not the first, and you probably won't be the last to see him. Just don't run alone at night. It's better to be safe." Emma nodded, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the ghostly figure and the tragic story behind it. Over the next few weeks, she avoided staying late at the track. But the memory of that night lingered, haunting her thoughts. She started asking around, talking to other teammates and even former students. Some dismissed the story as a silly legend, but others shared their own strange experiences, shadowy figures, unexplained chills, and even the sound of footsteps when no one else was around. Despite her fear, Emma couldn't shake her curiosity. She wanted to know more about the runner who had died. She visited the school library and dug through old yearbooks and newspaper archives. After hours of searching, she finally found an article about the tragedy. The runner's name was Michael Carter, and he had been a star athlete in the 1970s. The article described him as a dedicated and passionate runner who had dreamed of competing at the national level. His sudden death had shocked the entire community. Emma felt a strange connection to Michael's story. She admired his determination and understood the pressure he must have felt to succeed. But she also felt a deep sadness for him. He had died so young, with so much left to accomplish. One evening, As Emma was leaving practice with her teammates, she paused at the edge of the track. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the field. She thought about Michael and the unfinished race he was still trying to complete. Maybe he just needs someone to help him finish, she thought to herself. The idea scared her, but it also gave her a sense of purpose. She decided to stay late one more time, not to run alone, but to face the figure and help him if she could. She didn't tell anyone about her plan, afraid they would try to stop her or think she was crazy. That night, Emma returned to the track after everyone else had gone home. The air was cool, and the lights cast long shadows, just like before. She stood at the starting line, her heart pounding. "Michael," she called out softly, "if you're here, I want to help you." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, she saw the figure appear near the finish line, just as it had before. This time, Emma didn't feel as afraid. She took a deep breath and started running, her eyes fixed on the ghostly figure ahead. As she approached, the figure turned and began to move, gliding along the track. Emma ran with all her strength, matching the figure's pace. She didn't know what she was supposed to do, but she felt driven to keep going. As they neared the finish line, the figure seemed to slow down, almost hesitating. Emma pushed herself harder, crossing the line with a final burst of speed. When she looked back, the figure was gone. But this time, she didn't feel the icy chill or the weight of fear. Instead, she felt a sense of peace, as if something had been resolved. She stood on the track, catching her breath and staring at the empty field. From that night on, Emma never saw the figure again. The eerie feeling at the track seemed to fade, and the stories of the ghostly runner became less frequent. Emma felt a sense of closure, not just for Michael, but for herself as well. She continued to train and improve, inspired by the memory of a runner who had given everything for his dream. And while she never forgot the ghostly encounter, she no longer felt afraid. Instead, she felt honored to have played a part in helping the lost soul find peace. The music room mystery, the music room at Westbrook High, was a special place. It had a beautiful grand piano, the kind that made music sound magical. But the room also had a strange reputation. Many students said it felt creepy, especially at night. Some even claimed to have heard the piano playing on its own when no one was there. Over time, the room became known for its mysterious atmosphere. Sophia was a student at Westbrook High. She loved music more than anything else and was an amazing pianist. She spent hours practicing, perfecting every note and melody. Sophia didn't believe in ghost stories. When her friends talked about the strange things in the music room, she just laughed. "There's no such thing as ghosts," she would say confidently. One evening, Sophia stayed late after school to practice for an upcoming competition. The school was quiet, with most of the students and teachers already gone. The music room felt peaceful, and the grand piano stood in the corner, gleaming under the dim lights. Sophia placed her sheet music on the stand and began to play. The notes filled the room, echoing softly against the walls. She felt completely focused, her fingers moving effortlessly over the keys. As she played a complicated piece, something strange happened. She thought she heard another melody, faint and distant, coming from the other side of the room. Sophia's fingers froze. She stopped playing and listened carefully. The sound was unmistakable. The piano was playing by itself. Sophia's heart began to race. She stood up slowly and looked around the room. It was empty, just as it had been when she walked in. But the sound of the piano continued. She turned toward the grand piano, her mind struggling to make sense of what was happening. The keys were moving, pressing down one by one, as if an invisible person were playing. "This can't be real," Sophia whispered to herself. She took a step closer, her hands trembling. The melody was soft and sad, unlike anything she'd ever heard before. It seemed to carry a story, a feeling of longing and loss. Sophia felt both scared and fascinated. She wanted to run, but her curiosity kept her rooted in place. Suddenly, the music stopped. The room fell silent. Sophia stood there, unsure of what to do. Just as she turned to grab her things and leave, she felt something cold on her shoulder. It was as if a hand had gently touched her. Sophia gasped and spun around, but no one was there. She felt a chill run down her spine. Sophia quickly gathered her belongings and rushed out of the music room. She didn't stop running until she was outside the school. Her heart was still pounding as she tried to process what had just happened. Was it her imagination, or was there really something supernatural in the music room? The next day, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about the experience. She decided to tell her music teacher, Mr. Hargrove, about what had happened. Mr. Hargrove was an older man with a kind smile and a deep love for music. He listened carefully as Sophia described the strange melody, the moving keys, and the cold hand on her shoulder. When she finished, Mr. Hargrove looked thoughtful. "I've heard stories about that piano before," he said. "It's been in this school for many years. Some say it's haunted, but I've always thought those were just rumors." "Do you know anything about the history of the piano?" Sophia asked. Mr. Hargrove nodded. "The piano once belonged to a student named Emily. She was a gifted musician, much like you. Emily was preparing for a big recital when she tragically passed away in a car accident on her way to perform. After her death, her family donated the piano to the school. Some believe her spirit stayed with it." Sophia felt a mix of emotions. The story was heartbreaking, but it also explained the strange events in the music room. "Do you think it's her?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Mr. Hargrove admitted. "But if it is, perhaps she's trying to communicate through her music. Emily loved to play. Maybe that's how she's holding on to what she cherished most." Sophia decided to return to the music room that evening. She wanted to see if the mysterious music would happen again. She was nervous but determined. This time, she wasn't just looking for answers, she wanted to connect with the spirit, if it really was Emily. As the sun set, Sophia entered the music room once more. The air felt heavy, and the room seemed quieter than usual. She sat down at the piano and began to play. Her fingers danced over the keys, creating a gentle melody. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then, just as before, she heard the faint sound of another melody. It was the same sad, beautiful tune she had heard the night before. Sophia stopped playing and listened. The keys of the piano began to move on their own again, playing the ghostly melody. This time, Sophia wasn't as scared. She felt a strange sense of calm. "Emily," she whispered, "is that you?" The piano seemed to respond. The melody grew louder and more intricate, as if it was telling a story. Sophia closed her eyes and listened, letting the music wash over her. She felt a deep connection to the spirit, a sense of understanding that words couldn't describe. When the music finally stopped, Sophia opened her eyes. The room was silent once more. She felt a tear roll down her cheek. "Thank you," she said softly, unsure if Emily could hear her. Sophia gathered her things and left the room, feeling both emotional and at peace. From that day on, Sophia practiced at home. She didn't want to disturb the spirit in the music room, but she often thought about Emily and the beautiful music she had heard. It reminded her of the power of music to connect people, even across the boundaries of life and death. Over time, Sophia shared the story with a few close friends. Some believed her, while others thought it was just her imagination. But Sophia knew what she had experienced. The music room at Westbrook High would always hold a special place in her heart, not just as a place to play music, but as a place where she had felt something truly extraordinary. The mystery of the music room remained, but Sophia no longer felt afraid of it. Instead, she saw it as a reminder of how music could transcend time and space, carrying emotions and memories in ways nothing else could. And in her heart, she felt grateful to have shared that moment with Emily, the spirit who played the piano.